Hi, everybody. So today we are going to learn about using models to divide decimals by other decimals. At this point, you already know how to use it, or how to do this, I should say, using the standard algorithm or Big 7 or whatever your chosen strategy is. So today we're going to look at how do we model that? How do we visually represent what's going on when we're dividing decimals by other decimals? Okay. Now, here's what's going to be tricky for me is I have my little stylus pen here to draw on the computer, but it's still going to be a little bit crazy. So make sure that you're being neat on your paper, and I'm going to do the very best I can to be neat on my computer. Okay. So let's look at this first example. So it says, how many groups of 8/10 are in 2 and 4/10? In other words, what we're finding here is 2.4 divided by 0.8, or 2 and 4/10 divided by 8/10. So what we need to do is we need to take these 2 and 4/10 that they have modeled here, and we need to group them into groups of 8/10. Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky with my stylus. So I'm going to find 8/10 here. I'm going to come a little further over. There we go. Whoop. Here's one group. Let me switch colors. So then I see on this model, I have 2/10 left. So I need to group it with 6/10 over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. Bloop, bloop, bloop. There's the second group of 8/10. And then now I need to do our last one. I guess we will be using pink. So here's 4/10. Group it with these 4/10. All together, we end up getting how many groups? 3. Okay. So your book explains it a little bit differently than I just did. The way I did is the way that makes sense in my brain. You might, oops, my bad. It might make a little bit more sense to you, though, how the book did it. So let's look at that option really quick. So it says, since you're dividing by tenths, replace both of the wholes with tenths. Okay, so here's how we do that quickly. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's going to be one whole because 10/10 equals one whole, right? Here's our second whole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 2 wholes. And then we had 4/10 from the 2 and 4/10, right? So each whole equals how many tenths? 10. How many tenths do we have altogether after replacing the 2 wholes with tenths? Total, we have 10, 24, or 24 tenths total. So if we separate the tenths into groups of 8/10, let me switch colors here. So we do that one group of 8/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whoop. Here's another group of 8/10. And then here is our last group of 8/10. How many total groups will we have? 3. That is not a good 3. There we go. And are there any left over? In this case, no. We were able to make 3 equal groups. So that means that 2 and 4/10 divided by 8/10 equals 3 wholes. And of course, we can use the inverse operation of multiplication to check that. Okay, I'm going to pause the video so I can erase my screen. Meet me on the next page. Alrighty, so we're back and now we're on page 450. So looking at this example, it says how many groups of 600ths are there in 3/10? So essentially what we're doing is we're taking 3/10 and dividing that 3/10 into groups of 600ths. Okay, so how many hundredths total are in 3/10? Well, we know 1/10 is 10 hundredths, so 3/10 would be 30 hundredths. Okay, so the book shows us that we can draw those 30 hundredths, and I'm going to represent those with dots. We can show those 30 hundredths into groups of 600ths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Oops, this is together. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. So I took 30 hundredths and I divided them into groups of 600ths. So all together we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of 600ths with 0 left over. Therefore, our answer is 5. Okay. The other way you can solve this is you can do it directly on the model. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, that didn't work. Here we go. Normally I would do circles, but my pen's not going to let me do that. Okay. So that's 600ths. If this will do. Oh, it's not working. Here we go. 600ths. 600ths. This is another group, and this is another group. Altogether, we end up having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. Either strategy works just fine. Both of them will get you the same answer as long as you're being precise and careful. Okay. Scrolling down, I want you to take a moment, pause this video, answer these 2 talk about it questions, and then press play when you're ready to go over the answers with me. All right. So looking at number 1, it says look for a pattern. So we're going to be using this table to see what we notice. The table shows some quotients. Study the table and write a rule that we can use to find the quotients of 2 decimals, both to the 10th place without using models. Okay, so 2 and 4 tenths divided by 8 tenths equals 3. 3 and 6 tenths divided by 9 tenths equals 4. 2 and 8 tenths divided by 4 tenths equals 7. Well, if we think about it as whole numbers, 24 divided by 8 equals 3, blah, blah, blah. So if we're doing dividing a decimal number that goes to the 10th place by some group of tenths, we can just look at that as math facts that we know as whole numbers, right? So our rule could be something along the lines of if you're dividing tenths by tenths or some decimal with tenths by tenths, the rule would be that your quotient is going to be the same as if you were dividing whole numbers. Okay. Number 2 says use your rule from exercise 1 to find 4 and 8 tenths divided by 8 tenths. So the rule we just said was if we're dividing by some decimal to the 10th place divided by a 10th place, we can treat it as whole numbers. So what ends up happening is we get 48 divided by 8. That's a math fact, and we know that equals 6 whole groups. Okay. Therefore, that's our answer. When it says explain the process, I just sort of explain that using numbers in this case. It doesn't always necessarily mean words if you can explain with numbers. Okay. Let's flip over to the independent practice so I can explain something super quick before I tell you what you're doing today to practice this skill. All right, friends. So on the independent practice page, you're going to complete this entire page, page 451. And then once you finish that, you're going to work on iReady Math. Okay, your MyPath. So before you go on and start working independently, I just want to remind you that as you're modeling this, it takes way too long to draw each tenth as a rectangle and to draw each hundredth as a square, even though my squares are not looking good. It takes way too long to do that, okay? So if you're going to draw tenths, let's just draw them as lines. If you're going to draw hundredths, either draw them as dots or X's or even circles. It just needs to be something that's quick as you're working on this, okay? And remember, there's 2 different ways you could do this. You could represent the 2 and 4 tenths and then group your 3 tenths directly on there, or you could turn your 2 and 4 tenths into tenths like this and then circle or make really the groups of 3 tenths, okay? Either way works for us. I think that's all, so best of luck.